In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about resource guarding. Now, I've gone into a lot of detail in a previous episode in the podcast. So if you want to scroll down a little bit and look at it, it's also on my YouTube channel. If you look up resource guarding, dog training is my passion on the search bar on YouTube, you should find something that will help you find that episode. But I wanted to expand a little bit more on this episode because recently I've had a couple of consultations with some future clients where this is something that is going to be brought up, is going to be addressed. The resource guarding issue is a very misunderstood issue, in my opinion, when it comes to dogs. I used to believe, long time ago, and I believe a lot of people still feel this way, that resource guarding is this problem that can be completely wiped away, wiped out of the dog's mind, out of the dog's temperament, to never come back again. And although in some instances that can be done, I can tell you, having worked with so many dogs, and those of you who have worked with a lot of dogs will hopefully agree with this. Resource guarding, sometimes it's a temperament trait. It is so hardwired, so ingrained in their genetic makeup that you're not going to get rid of it. You can clarify some misunderstandings. You can help the dog feel more comfortable. You can make the dog more predictable, and you can make it so that it's a non-event. You can make it so that a dog that has a very strong inclination for resource guarding, you can make that dog be more predictable, be safe, and not have any issues with the resource guarding. With that being said, there are going to be things that could trigger the resource guarding. And I'm going to give you a little bit more detail here in a moment. If I have a particular dog, and we're using hypotheticals here because there are so many dogs that I've known. And again, if you're a dog trainer listening to this will resonate with you. If you're a new dog trainer listening to this, maybe not yet, but it will eventually. If you are a dog owner listening to this might be new information for you. There are dogs that if you give them a bowl of food or anything, maybe a toy, maybe a bone even, and then you put another dog in the room and that dog goes and stick its head, its nose in that other dog's bowl as it's eating, you're going to have some dogs that are just going to walk away. Very simple. They're going to walk away. They don't want to deal with a confrontation, and they'll just back away. They'll just walk away, and they won't even challenge it. Or you'll have some dogs that when the other dog sticks its nose in the food bowl, they'll share. And some dogs just are perfectly okay with that. It doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that we should allow it. But I'm just giving you an example of a particular reaction that a dog could have to something like that. Then you're going to have some dogs that if you give them a bowl or a bone or a toy and they're enjoying it, and even if another dog walks in the room, that alone is enough of a trigger to have that dog just go into aggression mode, to go into resource guarding mode, where the dog will immediately go, "Who the hell are you? Why are you here? Get out of my face." So for some dogs, the same environment, the same set of circumstances will mean nothing. And to another dog, even a mild version of that, but the same environment, if we make it the same, some of the dogs are going to have a vastly different response to the first scenario. That does happen. And it's not because the dog is a bad dog. It's not because the owner is a bad owner. It's not because the dog was abused. It's simply because some dogs have a stronger inclination to respond that way. I had a future client that I'm going to be working with, and also I've had other clients in the past that I've worked with where they've experienced that, and sometimes they get a little bit puzzled because when they notice it, they think back to previous dogs that they've owned, and they've noticed that in the past some of these dogs didn't have those issues, meaning the other dog that they owned in the past could have a bone. Children could walk past it. Children could pet it. The owner could pet it. The dog didn't care. And then they have another dog that they have a bone or they're eating a food bowl. And then the person walks past. And just by walking past, the dog starts growling. And this can puzzle people because they a lot of times don't think of it in terms of, well, these dogs are different. They think of it a lot of times in terms of, my other dog didn't do it. I don't understand why this dog is doing it. They just don't understand. And it doesn't mean that they're not bright. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means they don't understand how this works. We have to have that understanding, okay? We have to have this level of compassion towards people and dog owners that struggle with this and have a hard time comprehending why this happens, why this is happening to their dog. We have to realize that this is not their specialty. This is not their career. We chose this path. We chose the path of spending hours learning and studying and putting hands on dogs and just consuming as much information about what we do as possible. They didn't. They have their own professions, so they do not understand. It'd be like your vehicle. I make a lot of analogies because I feel that they're very important. But it'd be like you, if you're not mechanically inclined and you don't understand what a certain light on your dashboard means, or you don't understand what a certain noise means. Well, if you talk to some mechanics, they might go, well, that's easy stuff. You just, your tire is low. That's what that little light on your dashboard is. Or, well, that sound, that's easy. That's your belt. Anything, right? Anything that a mechanic would instantly and easily pick up and go, well, that's easy. Well, it's not easy to you because it's not your profession. It's not your hobby. So this is why people sometimes experience these things and they don't understand. And it's our job to educate them and help them out. And one of the ways that I find helping them out, the best way that I can think of is to inform them about this subject, this topic of temperament and inclination, propensity towards certain behavior, certain responses. Some dogs are going to be inclined to do certain things. They're going to be more inclined to chase small animals, to maybe get agitated a lot quicker with other dogs. These things happen, and a lot of times it's temperament. Sometimes it is misunderstanding. Okay, sometimes it is just misunderstanding. So now let's go back to the topic of resource guarding because that's where I wanted to start, and that's where I want to go. That's what I want to finish. Before we continue with that, I just want to ask you if you're enjoying this episode so far, if you're getting any little bit of value out of it, do me a huge favor, hit the like button, give me a comment, let me know what else you want me to talk about, and share it with somebody else. That helps me out tremendously. It spreads the message. And these episodes, they're short. They're short for a reason. I don't like listening to an hour and a half episodes. It's too long. My episodes are about 20 minutes, 18 minutes. Sometimes they're about 12 to 15 minutes. And I get a lot of good feedback out of that. So share with somebody else. I think they find it very helpful. I have a lot of good content in this channel. I have a lot of good content in the podcast. And all just free information. The only thing I ask in return is share it, spread the word, and hit the like button. Thank you very much. And now let's get back to this episode. Okay, let's get back to the resource guarding. So going back to resource guarding, here is how sometimes the misunderstanding happens. Let's say you have a dog that maybe they're not prone, they're not inclined to have a trigger to resource guarding. But let's say that environmentally this was created. Let's say maybe the dog was happy-go-lucky sharing its food, but the other dog just kept shoving it out of the way. Well, if that happens over and over and over and over, the dog, even though it's not genetically inclined to resource guard, that dog will by default is going to develop the skill of pushing the other dog away because naturally it has to eat. If you just eat your food only when you're allowed to eat it because the other dog's going to push you out of the way, well, at some point you're going to get hungry enough and you're going to go, that's enough. I have to eat this. And you're going to either have a confrontation, you're going to settle it, or you're going to have the confrontation and decide, okay, it's not worth it. The other dog is bigger, stronger, and will use more force. So I'm just going to bow out and I'm just going to let him eat and have his fill. But this dog, because of that, as a result of necessity, it could develop the skill of resource guarding. And it could learn that resource guarding actually works great because it means that he gets to eat all of his food. Now, it is going to be in a rush. It is going to experience stress because it's going to go, crap, I need to eat it. And anybody that's around me, I got to let him know you cannot have any of this. In that instance, if it is a skill that they learned, we can work on that. We can clarify that misunderstanding. And I call it a misunderstanding because it's not what the dog really genetically came to the world as. What happens when it's a misunderstanding is the dog learned the lesson about how the world works and came up with ways to cope with these situations. And so the dog learned, if I don't stand my ground, if I don't guard my food, some other dog is going to eat all my food. So as a result of that, I have to come up with a way to cope with this. And the best strategy for me to actually eat my food is to show some violence. That is a misunderstanding because in an ideal home where the owners are aware that this is happening, hopefully the owners, even if it means they get the assistance from another trainer, from somebody else to help them out, the owners eventually realize we probably shouldn't let that happen. We need to let our dog know that it is safe for him to eat. If it is a misunderstanding, I have noticed that it can be reversed. But this also means that the misunderstanding should be addressed as soon as possible. And here's what I mean by that. If the dog at a young age has the misunderstanding and it learns the skill of resource guarding because it was forced to, essentially, the younger we address it, the younger the dog is when we clarify the misunderstanding, the sooner the recovery. The older the dog is when you decide to address it, the harder it is to recover it. And the reason is, if let's say the dog learned that lesson at 8 months of age, if at 8 months of age, after a couple of months of the other dog, or maybe even the human child harassing it every time it eats, and the dog finally learned the lesson, you know what, if I growl, people or the other dogs leave me alone. Well, if that dog at 8 months of age learned that skill, and that skill served it for several years, this dog learned, okay, I've been doing this for several years, which in a dog's life, it's actually a very long time. Okay, by the time that dog is like 4 or 5, well, what happened? The dog got to practice that skill for several years. Now, trying to clarify this misunderstanding is going to be more challenging. That's where the adage of old dogs can still learn new tricks comes from. Okay? It's because there's this notion that, well, older dogs have this older dogs can't learn as easy as the younger ones, and it's not necessarily the case. It's just that an older dog has had way more experience doing things a certain way than a younger dog. So these lessons and teaching them new coping skills can take a little bit of time, but it can still be done. It just takes a little bit of strategy. Now, what the strategy is, I'm going to go over that here momentarily. By the end of the episode, I'm going to go over that. And let's go back to another scenario. In the other scenario, it's not a misunderstanding. In the other scenario, it's a genetic predisposition to be like that. Now, if you are new at this, you might wonder, well, how do I know which is which? How do I know if it's a misunderstanding? The dog learned this skill. And how do I know that from the dog that has the genetic tendency or the temperament tendency to do this? How do you know which is which? And here is my observation. Here's what I've noticed. Here's where you know it's a very good indicator that it is a genetic trait. My experience has been that when I see resource guarding at a very, very young age, I'm talking 7 weeks of age to like 10 weeks of age. If you see the resource guarding happening at that age, and the dog hasn't really had any experiences, the puppy hasn't really had any experiences that will lead it to believe that it needed to come up with a coping skill. If that hasn't happened, and then the puppy's displaying this at a very young age, then that is usually an indicator that this is more of a genetic or a temperament tendency. Okay, meaning it is so hardwired into the dog's brain, into the dog's behaviors, that the dog is not even aware of why it's doing it. It just knows that it's something that it needs to do. It's almost instinctual. And you notice, you pick this up when you see them at a very young age. And I'll tell you why. Resource guarding is normally a behavior that shows up when they're a little bit older. Okay, like the happy-go-lucky dogs are like, yeah, you can have some of my food. Yeah, you want to share this? We can share. No big deal. And then what happens is at some point when they're about close to a year of age, if they keep sharing, or the other dogs keeps helping itself to what they're having, at about a year of age or so, the dog will start going, okay, look, this is getting old. Let's not do that. And so sometimes they'll develop the resource guarding skill because it works really well. But when it happens at such a young age, like puppy, it's been my experience that when we see that, it is such a strong tendency for that individual that you're probably going to be dealing with this for the rest of the dog's life. Now, I'm not condoning it, and I'm not saying nothing can be done about it. Okay, that's not what I'm getting at here. I'm just saying that that's the difference. And these things, they're not misunderstandings. When it is a genetic or temperament trait, and I'm going to break that down a little bit too, because again, I have an entire video, an episode on genetics and temperament, but I'm going to clarify that for those of you who are just tuning in. I'm going to briefly describe the difference between the two. But when it's a genetic or if it's a temperament tendency, meaning it's so ingrained in the dog's individualness that it's just there. When it is that way, it's not a misunderstanding. Okay, the puppy, the dog doesn't even know. It's just instinctual. So in that instance, we can make it more predictable. We can make the dog, we can do these techniques that I'm going to be going over here soon We can use these techniques to basically let the dog know, look, dude, nobody's going to take your crap. Nobody's going to take your food. Nobody's going to take your bone. And we actually have to make sure that that does happen, by the way. Okay. And so what we do is we make the dog more predictable. So that's how we start to address. I'm going to give you more details here in a moment. So if it's a misunderstanding or if it's a genetic tendency, here's I found the best way to address it. The best way that I found to address it, whether it's a misunderstanding or if it's a genetic tendency, but especially if it's a misunderstanding. And again, if you don't know, meaning you adopted the dog and the dog came to you at a year of age and the dog is resource guard and you're like, well, crap, I didn't see this dog when it was 7-8 weeks of age, so I don't know which it is. Not a problem. We assume that, we don't know, but we're going to address it the same way, basically. And the best way to address it is as follows. We give the dog the food, okay, a food bowl, and all we do is, instead of messing with it, that's another thing that I strongly disagree with, people doing it this way, the way I'm gonna say how people do it, and I'm gonna tell you it creates more issues than not. What people, especially a lot of the old school trainers, will say, well, if the dog does this resource guard and this food aggression thing, when it's eating, you have to stick your hand in there and just let it know that it is safe. And you just have to basically be the alpha, and you need to take it and you need to stick your hand in there. If they give you any attitude, you got to smack them. Now, look, you might be able to, with a large number of dogs, you might be able to convey that message and let the dog know, don't fuck with me, right? You might be able to tell them, look, I don't care if you have resource guarding. I don't care if you had a misunderstanding. I don't care if it's a genetic or a temperament trait. You're just not going to do that to me. You're going to smack the dog. A number of dogs are going to get that message. They're going to go, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, got it. I'm just not going to mess with you. But it won't necessarily transfer to your daughter. It won't necessarily transfer to your child, to your son, to your spouse. It won't necessarily transfer to the other dog because it doesn't necessarily generalize. That's one of the problems. The other problem with that approach is you are, in fact, confirming the dog's belief to begin with. The dog already didn't feel safe. So by you saying, look, motherfucker, I'm going to stick my hand in there. Sorry about the cursing. If you say to the dog, look, SOB, I'm going to stick my hand in there and you're going to freaking like it. And if you don't like it, I'm going to smack you. Well, you just confirmed the dog's belief. You just confirmed that it wasn't a misunderstanding. All you did is you just asserted a hierarchy. You basically just said to the dog, you're right, it is not safe. Okay, I am going to take your crap whenever I feel like it, and you can't say anything about it. The dog will go, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, got it. You were completely right. I just know not to let you know that I have a problem with it because you have the authority figure here and I don't. And they'll back out, and this is where people go, see, we fixed that. Yes, in a way, you did fix it if you take that approach and it works out. I'm not here to tell you that that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you the reason I don't necessarily like that is because even though it is going to work on a number of dogs, it will make the problem worse on some dogs. With some dogs, you will make the problem worse because you are, in fact, confirming. They are, in fact, learning for sure, yes, I was right the entire time. And dad and mom just challenged me and I lost. And so I got it. I'm not going to challenge them back. I'm just going to bow out and step out. And this is how you quote unquote fix it. But there are going to be dogs that when you try to assert that dominance, when you try to assert that role of authority, some dogs are going to tell you, not without a fight. If you're gonna challenge me for it, I wanna make sure I have a shot. And now you are potentially planting the seed of conflict. You're planting the seed of friction, and this is now where you possibly create a bigger problem. I'm not hypothesizing this. I'm not thinking or guessing that might happen. I have seen it. I've worked with clients that's exactly what they did and made the problem worse. So I've seen it before. Okay, it does happen. I'm not suggesting you don't do that. And if you tell me, if you're thinking, well, that's BS. I've done it. I've corrected the dog and it works. So obviously it works. It obviously worked for you because you had one of those dogs. If you had a different dog, it might not work. And of course, you might be thinking, well, I don't care about the other dogs. It worked for my dog and I'm happy. And I'm happy for you as well. If you don't deal with that problem, I'm not going to tell you it was right or it was wrong. If you're happy, your dog is happy, everybody's in the family's happy, good for you. I'm just saying from the perspective of a dog trainer, having seen this play out a different way, it can create a bigger issue. Because think about it logically. You literally just confirmed to the dog that its belief, its fear that you were going to take its crap, it was confirmed. It was right. And it just so happened that you were the bigger dog. But with some dogs, they will challenge you. So the best way to do it, this is where I wanted to go, is to simply go the opposite way. And what I mean by the opposite way, I'm not saying you bow out and you step out. I'm not saying that. Hear me out. What I'm saying is this. Give the dog the food bowl, and I'm going to give the dog the food bowl, and it's going to have like kibble, something low value. If you go, look, I don't feed my dog kibble. I don't care. Give it something low value. Give it carrots, right? Just give it some carrots, something low value, kibble, and then just have it enjoy the kibble a little bit at a time in the food bowl. And then what you do is you step in, you get close within reason, okay? Make sure it's safe. So if the dog is 100 plus pounds and it's bit you in the past, obviously don't get too close, but get close enough as it has its low value food, and you then add the value, okay? So they get their little crappy kibble, or if you feed raw, they get the little pieces of carrots. And then I step in and I add high value. I'll add the extra treats. I'll add the cheese, the chicken, whatever you and your dog determine is high value for that situation. What happens is, over a period of time, what you are actually teaching the dog is that, look, when I happen to be near you as you're eating, I'm actually adding value. Okay? Now, we're not stepping in all scared, throwing the food, and then running away. We're not doing that. You are comfortably adding value. What you're doing is you are counter-conditioning. That's what you're doing. You're counter-conditioning. The dog has a perception about that situation. It has this belief that if I'm eating and somebody else is close to me, they're going to take something away from me. What we're doing is we're counter conditioning. So counter meaning opposite, conditioning meaning teaching or learning. We're teaching the dog that what they expect to happen doesn't happen. Actually, the opposite happens. I get close, you get the food, you get the high value, I step away. Over time, it teaches the dog to be excited and happy about your presence as it's eating, which is the opposite of the dog getting defensive when it's eating and you get close. That's why we call it counter conditioning. And you're going to notice one of two things are going to happen. The dog that, if this was a misunderstanding, they unlearn the previous skill, and then they learn, okay, in this household, with this family, that doesn't happen. Okay, or even if it was with the same family and the misunderstanding happened with the same family, but we can go, starting now, that's not how things are. It's not what you think is going to happen. It's not what's happened in the past. It's different now. Now, if the dog is younger, like I mentioned, that misunderstanding will get cleared up fast. If the dog is older and it's been practicing that skill for a lot longer, that misunderstanding is going to take a little bit of extra time to unlearn. That skill will take time. The new skill will take time to rebuild. The picture will take time to make that association to the dog. So this is how you undo that. Also depends on your individual situation, your individual dog. So I can't give you an accurate timeline. I've seen the misunderstanding get cleared up in as little as 1 week. And I've also seen it take several weeks, depending on the dog's age, depending on the dog's intensity by the time they're exhibiting this behavior. Now, how do you know if this is going to work on the dog, that this is the genetic or the temperament tendency? Well, what you'll notice is it will get better, it will get predictable, but it'll still kind of be there. And I can only tell you this because there's an infinite number of ways that this can go, because I don't know every single dog out in the world. I don't know every situation out there in the world, so I can only give you some parameters. But with the dog where this is a genetic or a temperament tendency, you're going to notice that in general, it will get better. It will get more predictable. But you stick your hand in there, the dog will still go, no, there's something about it that just triggers this demon inside of me, and I just want to get violent. I can tell you this. I have several dogs, and out of the dogs that I have, 2 of them have resource guarding, and it is genetic. It is in their DNA, or it's part of their temperament. And I'm going to go over that here momentarily. Meaning with these guys, they exhibited it at a younger age. Never had a I never took anything from them. I never stuck my hand in their food bowl. They just instinctively just had this defensiveness about them when they were enjoying their mealtime. Because for some of them, like, mealtime is sacred. It's like a sacred ritual, and you don't mess with that. So at a young age, these 2 already had that, like, very, very ingrained. One of my dogs is Rust. He's the almost 11-year-old dog now, as of the making of this episode. He exhibited that resource guarding at a young age. And so, very simple. I did the drill that I'm telling you, but I know that there are things that I just don't push the envelope. I can take anything from him. Never had a problem. He can eat, but here's the thing: when he eats, I don't mess with him. I'm not trying to prove that I'm the superior one. Look, if it's your mealtime, here's your meal, eat it. I'm not gonna mess. I don't want your food. Okay, occasionally in the beginning, early on, I would add things, and still to this day, if, like, my dogs eat raw, so like as he's eating something and I forgot to add a supplement to his food. Well, I'm like, oh crap, he's eating. I forgot to add the supplement. I'll grab the supplement and I'll bring it over to him. And because we have this relationship, like, he's fine. He doesn't get all mad at me. Because we have this relationship, I've never had to, like, assert my dominance, tell him, F off, this is my food. I've never had to do that, even though he has that genetic tendency about him. But if I forgot to put a supplement in his bowl, I'll just walk in, I'll just get close, I'll even grab his bowl at the supplement, and he knows our relationship is predictable. He's not going to have a problem with that. Now, if another dog gets to his bowl, he's going to have a problem. He's not going to share. If somebody else comes over and tries to grab his bowl, he's going to have a problem. So this is where I mean by the predictability will be there if you do this right. My other dog, same thing. My younger dog, Vlad, he's the same way. And I started to notice this also at a young age. What I would notice is he was young. I would give him his food bowl. He would eat. And then when his food bowl was empty, naturally, obviously the food bowl was empty and he just kept licking that food bowl like more food was going to come out of there. So when the food bowl was empty, I would grab the food bowl and he would get mad as a young dog. Now, old school trainers would have been like, oh, I would have smacked him right then and there. But this is the nonsense that I personally don't like, because I don't want to confirm to this young dog that's how the world works, and that he was right to get defensive about his empty food bowl. So rather, what I did is what I suggested. It doesn't lower my status. This is where people think, oh no, you can't have food. It doesn't lower my status. If everything in my relationship with my dogs, the other 23 hours and 55 minutes, we don't have any issues. Well, the 5 minutes that they're eating and I add value, that's not going to lower my status. There's so much more building of relationship that will not affect our relationship at all. Me just coming over and adding good things to them, it doesn't do anything bad. All it does is it makes our relationship stronger. They realize dad is never going to take anything from me. It makes us more predictable in that scenario. And now it's not a problem. But I know it's so ingrained because I saw it at a young age. And also, again, if another dog gets close or if another person were to do that, they will have problems. So to me, it's about predictability. I want to improve the odds. And so when I talk to these prospect clients, when I'm talking to these clients, that's what I want to communicate to them because sometimes they don't understand. Now, just like I promised, I wanted to go over the difference between temperament and genetics. Okay, temperament and genetics. And real quick, before we do that, I talked about supplements. I want you to be aware of this company called New Vet Labs. That's where I get my supplements. My clients, I've gotten them from there as well. Good products. They have supplements, like all around supplements. It's got a lot of good stuff. And they also have a joint supplement for the larger dogs and the older dogs. Okay, so you go to newvet.com/989420. That's November Uniform Victor Echo Tango.com/989420. And that number is also your order code or your customer code. Okay, so now the difference between temperament and genetics. I told you I would explain that briefly, and I'm going to go over that before we wrap it up. Temperament is their personality, so to speak. Okay? It's their unique idiosyncrasies that have nothing to do with how their parents were. So I'll give you an example about temperament. If I have an aggressive male, and I'm making this very, very simple, so don't overcomplicate it in your head. If I grab a very aggressive male and a very aggressive female, and I put them together, and they have babies, there is a very good chance that the babies are going to have some of these aggressive tendencies. That's genetics. It makes sense. The genetics, mom is aggressive, dad is aggressive, babies are going to have a genetic tendency. They're going to be prone to have some of these same aggression issues. However, there will be a puppy in that litter or two that don't display these aggression tendencies, that don't have the same aggressive tendencies as mom and dad. And you'll actually notice they're quite friendly. Well, this is their temperament. And I'm simplifying it, by the way. Okay, so if you're a dog trainer and you geek out on this stuff and you're like, oh, that's not how it goes. I'm trying to explain it in 2 minutes. So just be open-minded about the explanation here. And if you're not a dog trainer that geeks out on this stuff, I know this is simple enough for you to understand. And I've worked with a lot of dogs. I've worked with a lot of puppies. I've seen a lot of puppies grow up. I've seen a lot of puppies and their parents, and I've seen the connection, the correlation, the similarities, and the vast differences based on all of these things that I'm telling you about. So genetically, you have an aggressive dog. And remember, this is a very simple example. Okay, there are so many ways we can go with this. But simple example, let's say you have a dog-aggressive male, dog-aggressive female. Puppies are going to be very likely prone to have some of these dog aggression issues. And if they start developing these dog aggressive issues, and then you happen to know mom and dad were also dog-aggressive, well, it makes sense, right? Genetically, this makes sense. However, if one of these puppies, which does happen a lot, they come out of the womb and they actually love dogs, they have zero problems with dogs, and they have other traits about them You'll notice one puppy will be very friendly with people, and the other puppy will not be friendly with people at all. Some puppies will, same litter, okay, same parents. Some puppies will be very confident. Some puppies are not going to be very confident. And obviously, if it was just genetic, they will all be carbon copies of mom and dad, but they're not all carbon copies of mom and dad. Sometimes they are. Sometimes the genetics are very strong, but a lot of times they're vastly different from mom and dad. That's their temperament. They have these tendencies that are not related to genetics. It's just more related to their, to their personality, so to speak. That's the difference between temperament and genetics. So that's why throughout the episode, I was saying that genetic tendencies or temperament tendencies that lead them to be a certain way sometimes, and it's almost like it was ingrained in them, like it's like they came to the world this way. Well, it could be temperament, it could also be genetics.